Hello people of the interweb, my name is Kiwi, and you have apparently come here for some PvP advice. Now, before you click off, I'm not just going to tell you to click faster and strafe around your enemies and all the boring stuff all the other tutorials tell you. This is going to be a tutorial that's going to actually help you learn to get better with actual advice that will be applicable to most PvP scenarios, and it'll help console players and mobile players in addition to PC players who generally have the edge. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so if you're already watching this tutorial, I trust that you know click on enemy hurt, don't get hit less is the basic premise of PvP. However, there's a lot of little skills that you can learn and get better at around that to make the parts in between the fights themselves be better. I'll explain what that means in a minute. It probably doesn't make much sense now. But the first thing is speed bridging. So many players, even on Bedrock, which is what we play here, bridge like they're on Java, which is turning around and crouching and slowly placing blocks behind them, and then just get killed instantly. And not only in games like Skywars or Treasurewars, but just understanding the way building mechanics work in Bedrock can really improve your chance of survival in a manhunt or whatever else scenario, even if it's not something where you have to bridge from island to island. Like I did in my randomized items versus 2 hunters video, I narrowly escaped multiple times by just speed bridging. So real quick, here's my mini tutorial on how to MJ bridge, which is safe bridging, but you're jumping in the process. It is the best method of bridging. So you want to start out, build up on this kind of platform. You want to start out by backing up at least 3 blocks from the edge, and you want to start walking forward and holding down your place button at the same time. And once you get here, you'll have around 2 blocks in front of you. You're still walking forward, you're still holding down your place button, and you just want to jump up. Just jump up and the bridge will start itself, and you can start sprinting and you can start jumping, and it's really not that hard. So I recommend going into a flat word like I am in this clip and just practicing speed bridging. It'll take around a week. It took me to get really consistent with it, but after that you'll be so happy you did because it's a really nice skill. The next thing I want to talk about is hotkeys. Now, if you're watching and you play on console or whatever, you're probably thinking, "Oh, Kiwi, I'm on console. I can use hotkeys." And if you don't know, hotkeys are where you press a button, usually on a keyboard, to switch to a specific hotbar slot in your hotbar at the bottom of your screen. And it's really useful for PvP. However, on console, if you think about it, I know there are some buttons, depending on how you have your controls mapped, that you don't use. So I recommend getting used to those and mapping your hotkeys to some of those buttons. As for my hotkeys, I use 2 buttons on the side of my mouse for my sword slot and my block slot for my 1 and 7 slots. And then I also use my middle click button, which is usually pick block, which nobody uses, for my 5 slot, which is usually a pearl or something else. And then I also use the X button on my keyboard for my 3rd slot. That's usually where my snowballs go. What you put in these slots can vary, but notice how I have my slots spread out, so I can easily switch to a part of my hotbar without having to scroll all the way across, and then I can move to the left or to the right some with my scroll wheel or with my controller joysticks or with whatever else. Like I said, what'll be in these slots will vary from what you're doing, but generally I like to keep my sword and my blocks in the same slot, and then something to clutch with, like a pearl or something. And it's important to have that muscle memory, because when you do, you can tie them all together. You can be fighting somebody, and then you can fall, and then you can throw it into pearl, and really fast you can switch to your blocks and save yourself. Something like that, hotkeys become really useful for. Next is movement, which could be called parkour, although I don't like calling it parkour. It includes block placement too. It's basically how you move around in the fastest and most efficient way possible. The way I practice this a lot is Death Run on the Hive, because it requires parkour and fast reaction time. Skywars, believe it or not, is also really good for that, because you have to use blocks too. I'd put block trapping under this category, and other things like that, like placing block to parkour across a wall or something. It's really useful, and often if you're really good at it, you can outmaneuver opponents and cause them to fall into the void or whatever else, and you'll still be alive because you have better parkour and block placement. Also in manhunt a lot, you want to be good at parkour. If you get stuck on a block or whatever, that could be the end of you and you'll get punched to death. So definitely Death Run, or even just running around a regularly generated world and placing blocks to parkour across trees and stuff, will all help with that and help you get used to that. Last but not least, it's important for you to be playing on the correct settings. If you're playing your Minecraft on the wrong settings, it's just going to be too hard for you. There's tons of tutorials on YouTube for the correct settings, but let me give you what my settings are and then what I recommend for you guys. So my FOV is at 95. I know that's kind of high for some people, but I would not go above 100 because then your enemies are going to be too small on your screen. It's going to be too hard to hit them. I've got a pretty big monitor because I play on PC, so higher FOVs are recommended for console and PC players. If you're on mobile, you're going to want to have a lower FOV, or else it's just going to be too much happening on screen, and like I said, it's going to be too hard to hit your enemies. Now, sensitivity is a big debate between me and some of my friends. I like lower sensitivity. I use around 1200 DPI for my mouse, for those of you who knows what that means, and around 14 sensitivity on my Minecraft, which is fairly low. But the mistake I made before I really got into PvP more was having way too high sensitivity, and then your camera is too shaky, you're not hitting anything, your aim is horrible, and you have to get used to the lower sensitivity. It's definitely a learning curve. It'll take you a little bit, but your PvP benefits from it for sure. And last but not least, game sense is one thing that I think a lot of people look over because it's not something that you can know necessarily. It's hard to explain, but just knowing what game you're playing, be it Treasure Wars or Survival Minecraft, knowing all the game mechanics and knowing how you can use them or even exploit them to your advantage can definitely help, even if you're not the best at PvP. That's how I usually do well on the Hive, especially when I take my friends over there because they don't play Hive as much, and I just, even if they're better than me at PvP, I can just roll all of them because they don't know what's happening when I use a knockback boombox or combo them with snowballs or something. It's definitely an advantage. With that, I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, seriously, feel free to leave a comment. I'll answer all the comments that have questions and do my best to explain. I could always do a part 2 if there's things I left out that you guys want help with. I'm not the best at PvP myself, but these are definitely some things that I do and that other people do to improve their PvP. So I hope you guys learned something. And like I said, any questions, feel free to comment. And thanks for watching. Bye!